Hi, everyone. It's Gustavo, the host of the Enabled Disabled podcast. We have a special treat for everybody today. Oscar nominated director, Courtney Marsh. She is a brilliant filmmaker. We are going to be diving into Chau, her award winning film. And we are also going to explore how she got into filmmaking, some of her creative process, and she's going to tell us a little bit about what she's working on now. Little brief description of me. I am a 45-year-old Latin American male. I have dark brown hair combed to the middle, and I am wearing a navy blue polo shirt. I am in my living room right now, and you can see a little bit of some beige drapes and some blinds. Courtney, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks for having me. This is where I introduce myself, where I say what I look like. And
Please. Yeah.
all right. So yeah, I'm Courtney. Pretty much what Gustavo said. I right now I'm wearing a cinephile t-shirt. I'm actually sadly wearing a film hat too, just to go full geek. I'm 35, Caucasian, and dashing looks, of course. I'm in my office. My 12 and a half-year-old pit bull dog is sleeping behind me. And yeah, very beige in my room, I'm realizing. Very, very beige. I got a big whiteboard behind me too with like all my projects at their various stages. So yeah.
Your hat matches really well with the room color.
That was unconscious coordination. I'm just starting to realize maybe half the things I own are beige.
So I'd love to get started with tell us a little bit about when you were growing up. When did you start to get drawn into filmmaking? How did you explore it? How did you start that process?
Yeah, so I grew up in South Florida in Fort Lauderdale. Um, I was always a really great athlete growing up. Like I would say like that was my thing. Like I always thought I would, I don't know, be a professional athlete. But I was really, really drawn to books as a young kid. I just loved reading, which eventually led to like writing. Um, but I was really good at sports. That was my identity. So I would kind of like do the sports and then go write in my room every evening and never tell my parents or anything like that. And then it slowly started to evolve. But funny enough, I think what really happened was it's so silly, but I want to say it was 99. The Matrix came out and someone brought on Christmas, got me, it was someone who was just like a family friend, randomly got me a VHS. Um, I hope everyone listening to this podcast knows what a VHS is, but a VHS of The Matrix. And I remember just like, it's kind of sad when Christmas is over and the holidays are over. It's like, all right, the fun's gone, whatever. And I went up and I watched this movie and it blew my mind. It like just absolutely blew my mind. Like I was like, because of the visual style and what it did beyond books. And I was like, I'm pretty sure I've always been a more visual person. I love writing, but like, this is it. Like, that's what I want to do. Just what it did to my mind. Like, I don't know if people like me, whoever listening likes the Matrix, but I was like, are we in the Matrix? So I that stayed with me for like a long time. And I slowly started moving into like, when I got into high school, I started getting into like theater but I never wanted to act. I loved running the spotlights. I loved writing. I loved the technical aspects of it. So I slowly started, yeah, just kind of falling in love with that. So I'd go run my track race, right? And then my coach was like, cool down. But I had a theater play that night. I would just run to the parking lot and run across the street and go to theater, run the spotlight, just still sweating. I just loved it. It was just something new to me. It was probably something more difficult as sports came quite naturally to me. And I was too afraid though to really leave the identity. I mean, when I say I was big in the sport, I was like always all county. I was always all state. I was always in the championship. Like it was like I did really well in high school, especially. But in one of my junior year, or no, it was my senior year of high school, I had two friends pass away. Like two of my best friends pass away in a car accident. And I was just like, you know, I got to stop being scared. I just got to do what I want to do. And I'd been eyeing certain schools always with the intention of doing film, just never told anybody. I was kind of getting in on an athletic academic scholarship kind of thing. And I just was like, I'm just going to go full throttle. And I applied to UCLA and I got in and got into the film school. And then that's when I really realized I knew nothing. I just had this passion for it. Because when I was growing up, we didn't have, I feel like the most artistic film I grew up seeing was like American Beauty. And when I got to film school and people who had come up in the arts or parents, you go to UCLA, as people whose parents were in the film industry, they're bringing in Gaspar Noé, Lars von Trier, like things I had just never experienced. And yeah, I think that's kind of like the short version of kind of how I got into it. I guess it all started with books and then it just kind of compounded over time.
So there's a lot there that is interesting. So you ran track. That was your main sport. Did you play any team sports?
Well, I grew up playing all the guys' sports, all the guys' teams, baseball, soccer, flag football. But then, like when you reach a certain age, and I was really good. I was like, I would get MVP, like just to give you paint the picture, right? So there's a lot of identity issues too when you're going through that. And then at a certain age, they're like, you play softball or you play girls soccer, so I did a lot of team sports and I actually didn't even want to run. It sounds awful, doesn't it? Like, I mean, just running in a circle over and over. But I signed up for cross country to get into, to train for soccer. I loved soccer. Still kind of one of a regret I have was maybe just got so good at cross country. I was too nervous to do soccer. I was like kind of scared to try out. And my coach was like, I did so well my first year. They were like, you need to start training for track. So I was like, all right, I'm good at this. I'll stick with this. So after high school, track really became the thing. Um, I actually love team sports a lot more. And I also grew up a competitive surfer because my family was really into surfing. So I did all the sports. Aside from like volleyball and tennis, I feel like I was in the mix.
Interesting. And as you started to get into, it's interesting that you said, you started to get into books and reading and writing, but you never really told anybody. Um, I imagine that. So any books that really grabbed you that you remember that helped helped with anything, or just was it more like an escape? Was it a relaxation? Like what was it about the books and the writing that you found useful?
Definitely an escape would be one of them. Just adventure and things like that. I mean, obviously, like I'm a huge Jane Austen fan. Like that was big for me. The Awakening, those kind of like real feminist pieces are. I loved those. But to be honest, I remember just being really young and I mean, I liked the Hardy Boys, not like I liked those things. I just thought they were funny enough, James and the Giant Peach. I don't know why, but that was a good book. Like underrated. I mean, underrated. But yeah, I loved it. I'm trying to think. Of course, like when this is over, I'm gonna think of all the books that I loved growing up. I like the Narnia stuff, like just the basic stuff when you're a kid. A Separate Piece was a huge one. I loved English in high school. The Scarlet Letter, all the classics. I loved them, Shakespeare. Um, but I think, to be honest, the best trilogy I read in high school was Lord of the Rings. It's like right when the movies were coming out, I was like, oh, the movies are good. I'm going to read the books, and the books were just phenomenal, and the world building was just unreal. And I don't know, that was, yeah, I think it compounded, but it was an escape, and I just thought it was amazing to be able to create a world entirely different from one's own. Because in comparison, my world felt so boring to these insane adventures. And right now, though, I got over the past couple of years, I got really into. I think I'm like always kind of sticking the young adult fantasy. I really love that stuff. Young adult, it's just like elevated young adult, dystopian stuff. I just love that stuff. So yeah.
And as you started to get into theater, I would like, did you have different groups of friends that you were moving between, or was theater just something you did because you were interested in at school, but your other group of friends was still somewhere else, or did it come from athletics? Like, how did you start to merge those worlds as you were growing up?
Well, I'm really lucky in that my friend group in high school, actually kind of through middle school, but really solidified in high school is like a really, they're still my best friends. Really accepting, really just like me didn't stick into anyone. We were just all really good friends, and we had athletes in that group. We had not athletes in that group. It was like a whole mix. But funny enough, I don't know how I got into this youth group, but I was like through friends. I had two worlds, two theater worlds, and then I had a sports world. So I had my track friends, but a few of those track cross country friends were part of like my friend group. And then I had this whole other group that was through like our Presbyterian church that would like hold these like really intricate, really good musicals. Like they were completely produced, full on costume makeup, like live music. I ended up doing all the technical directing for that in this last 2 years, ran the spotlight, the whole deal. I started out though being part of the chorus or being part of the cast. So I didn't really have too much trouble navigating. For some reason, they all kind of merged. The only thing I think it was more for me and like my parents, they thought that was all great, but like the priority was always sports because that's what I was great at. Like if you're winning races, if you're in that, like I was in the newspaper all the time, I was getting interviewed all the time, that versus running a spotlight at a theater, So I would say my friend groups all kind of merged, luckily. So that part wasn't hard. I think it was more with the family of identity or like, who am I to my parents or something like that, if that answers your question.
That does. So I'm wondering, and we're going to get into the UCLA film school experience, which I'm fascinated by, but where do you think the fear came from that you talked about, right? Like you're obviously um, well integrated, like you're smart, you're doing great in school, you're this really great athlete. Like where do you think the fear came from within yourself, to not try out for soccer again, or to continue that, or you know to maybe not apply to film school and do those things? Like where did that fear?
I think like, I'm sure it's for a lot of people. I think it's the fear of not being good enough. I'm someone I have a lot of shame, or I was raised with shame, like I think you're scared. I was really good at what I did. So to not be good at what you do is scary, or to be exposed or to be vulnerable. I didn't grow up where vulnerability was promoted. For me, it was tough, especially in sports, right? It's tough. I think I'm a very vulnerable person. As most of us are, but I'm very sensitive and, these things. I just think I was really scared to be cut, like, to be cut from the soccer team. Like I remember in theater, it was my first time. I never acted. I didn't do any of that stuff, but I really wanted to be in this theater play. But to be in the theater play, I was a freshman in high school. Just to be in the chorus, to be in the background, you had to get up on stage and sing a solo by yourself. That, and I was like in love with one of the guys who, was also auditioning. It's like the typical story. It was Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. That was the play. Um, that I somehow sucked it up and I did it because I knew I'd make it even if I was terrible. I think with soccer, I was just like intimidated by like, I have that thing that a lot of people have, and I think it's more prominent with women based off research, but it's like, I have to do all these things to become a professional in order to be qualified to get the job or something like that. And I wasn't as qualified as a lot of the girls trying out for soccer. I think I would have been amazing at it because I was naturally good at that stuff, but I felt like maybe I just didn't have the qualifications. Um, I don't know. I just think it's a fear at the end of the day of not being good enough. I think it's something most of us suffer from. And I think that that's something that to this day, I still have a lot of trouble with, like, what if I'm not perfect? What if I'm not the best? Um, that's, that plagues me.
But it also inspires and drives you to keep improving and to keep working at it. And right. So when you went to UCLA and you're immersed in this whole Hollywood culture and you're surrounded by all these students who seem to know more about film than you do and have had all this exposure to that world, like I'm sure you felt part of you felt out of place. And then part of you was like driven by that to get better, to immerse yourself, to fuel your passion. Is that accurate, or did something else happen?
That's a really good question. Well, like point. I think for me, if I'm being completely transparent, for me, I was slightly ignorant. Like I was just like, I got in, I'm doing what I want to do. I can do this. When my friends passed away, I had this like thing in my head because they were like 17 and 18. No drinking, no, it was just an accident. It was a freak accident. They were driving up to Halloween Horror Nights and they got into a car crash and they died. And so I had this like thing in my head that like, well, what if I don't live long? Like I'm going to die soon too, or something. It's so weird, but something happened. Um, so when I got to film school, I think I was so excited I got in because there was like 15 people who got in. I was like, I deserve to be here. And I was kind of ignorant. I saw people bringing in stuff, but I was never like ashamed of like my American Beauty clips. I just like wasn't, I was so naive in a way. It's more in retrospect that I'm like, wow, everyone was like so much more, whatever, better than me. However, however, if I look back at that time, um, I chose to do documentary because I was so insecure on like, what am I going to write about? Like, what is my voice? What is my story? So it's this weird thing, which I don't know if I fully figured out. I'm like trying to figure it out in this moment where I was intimidated and insecure, but at the same time, equally naive and confident that I was going to figure it out. And it led to me doing documentary confidently. Um, but like soccer, right? I did cross country confidently, but I gave up soccer. So I did documentary confidently, but I gave up the fiction filmmaking, which I think deep down I really wanted to do. Does that make sense?
That does make sense.
I probably need to like have a therapist break that down for me.
But it's so you chose documentaries for an interesting reason. But so do you feel like you're tied into being a documentary filmmaker at this point? If you wanted to transition to fiction later on, is that something that's not not in the cards or is really difficult? Like how does that work?
So I'm primarily fiction actually. So when I started Chau, the documentary when I was in UCLA film school.
Okay.
But we had shot all this stuff and it was way over my head. Like I had no idea what I was doing. We just went and we shot this movie. Me and my best friend at the time, he was Vietnamese. We just like, we're going to go have this like experience. And we stumbled upon this thing, which I'm sure we'll get into, but I stayed an extra year into fiction. And after that, I went into being a production assistant, camera. I never did doc. I only wrote and directed my own pieces all the way through. Even now, that's what I'm focusing on. Chau was just a kind of like an anomaly in my, in my, journey or whatever. It was just this amazing thing that happened. And I took what I knew from narrative, really could edit Chau's story in a way that I think it deserved to be edited because it was very much a narrative story. It has its beginning, middle, and end. It was someone with a goal and overcoming the obstacles to get it. So no, I think to the industry, it's hard to transition. Like I got nominated in doc, and that's very hard to transfer over to narrative or to fiction. But for me, I don't see a real difference.
Okay. So
A story is a story, right?
you would be open to doing both for your career if the right opportunities came along?
Sure. So documentary. So I just produced a documentary, just finished. And then I'm literally in pitches with a series right now, and I'm getting my first narrative feature off the ground. So I'm completely working in the narrative space. Um, the thing is with documentary, you're dealing with people's lives. You're dealing with a lot of moral, ethical issues. It's a lot of time not knowing what's going to happen. And while it's sometimes cheaper to make, uh, there's not like it's hard to continue with doc, like to continue making a living. A lot of people would disagree with that, but it depends what the docs I want to make, let me say, and at where I'm at in my career. It's a lot of it's hard, it's a lot of caring, it's a lot of effort, it's a lot of payless hours, it's a lot of, and I think the outcome is worth it. But I think in order to like do that, you have to, for me, I have to separate it. Like I have 3 other doc ideas I would love to do, but I'm not my heart is not ready. I like have to kind of gear up for something like that because there's so much out of your control. And you got to rewrite based off what's happening in real life. And it's the docs they're making on Netflix right now, I'm not talking about those like the Tinder swindler, things like that. Those have been written, they're reenacted, they're cut, this is like what me and my producing partner are interested in is like following people's lives and seeing where it takes you. And then in retrospect, you have to go like edit a story off of that. And so yeah, so anyway,
So
um
so that's interesting. So let's talk about you started filming Chow when you were still in school, which is incredible. How did that opportunity come about?
so when I decided I wanted to do when I wanted to do documentary, to take a sip of water. Um when I wanted to do documentary, I had a lot of support. I was really, really enthusiastic. Like imagine doing sports your whole life. Like college sports is so demanding. So I ended up quitting. I got into film school and like quitting with the blessing of my coach, really good grades, got into film school. And I was like, I'm free. I'm like going to finally do what I've wanted to do for 10 years. Like this is all I want to do. So I got really into it. I met my really good friends. We in film school, we were like inseparable and we would just film a bunch of stuff, whatever. And basically I had to do a thesis project and I was like kind of an overachiever. And I was like, oh, I'll do it my first year, not my second year. And I was talking to him and he's like, well, um, he was Vietnamese and he's like, I've always wanted to go back. And why don't we do a doc over there? So I was like, all right. I was like, yeah, let's do it. There's nothing we can't do? So he's like, maybe we could like do a verite doc. And I was like, what if we did it this? And he's like, well, there were these street kids. I was like, yeah, you have to, it's like 2000. I don't even know what it was, 2006. Um, and we're like, yeah, let's do this. So we put together this pitch deck that was great. He was really good at Photoshop. I like wrote the story. It's like, we're going to do this whole thing. We got funding from the school. We did donation parties. Like people gave us money. Independent people donated miles. People were just like, we bought a camera, like this awesome camera, like a mini DV, but it had its own lens, like back focus. It was just so awesome. Got sound. And we just went to Vietnam like without a plan. Like we just went there. It was awesome. But we had support from the beginning. It was really like a dream come true, It was like just a really amazing thing. So yeah, so that's kind of how it came about. And then how we found, I don't know if you want me to go to that next, but how we got into this actual topic and found Chow was like a completely different thing.
Yeah, please. How did that happen?
So we were over there, and um we had our tickets there for like 2 months or something. And we were gonna be there for a minute. We were staying in like this very small hotel that his friend's parents knew or his parents' friends owned. And because you have to go through like when you go shoot in Vietnam, by the way, I stand out. I'm like the whitest human in the world. Like I am Irish as you can get. I'm taller than a lot of the people there. I just stand out. I have blonde hair. I'm so American. It's gross. And you have to go and talk to government officials and be like, can I film here? So me and my friend are going, we're at, you catch people's attentions. This TV producer came to our hotel. It's like, listen, I get you guys want to do this doc on like street kids and blah, blah, blah. But like, let me take you to this hospital and like show you what you should really do your documentary on. So this guy, we're like, all right, you know, so we go with him to the back building in a maternity hospital in the middle of Saigon or Ho Chi Minh or whatever your preference. And it is for kids who have been ab- abandoned is the wrong word, but orphaned maybe or given up by the birth parents because of they either have a disability or they have a deformity or something like that due to dioxin in the bloodstream, which is the main chemical toxin in Agent Orange, which is the chemical that the U.S. sprayed during the Vietnam War to kill vegetation overnight and to expose the northern Vietnamese who they were fighting against, who were practicing guerrilla warfare and, hiding in the trees. So I go back up there. You have to remember, I've traveled, but I'm not like I wasn't the most worldly. And you go into that camp and you see some things that you've never seen before, like that almost don't maybe register a little bit because, I'm 20 years old and I didn't know what Agent Orange was. I legit had no idea. So we met with like the nurses or like the head nurse and we took a tour kind of. It's weird. You just like walk down this hallway, which I'm sure that the movie you've seen the photographers and stuff. You can do that. I didn't take photos like that, but you're kind of like, where am I? We went home where like we had to really talk about this. Like, are we going to do something here? Like, I was like, I think we need to like explore this. So I look it up. I read about what Agent Orange is. I realize it's connected to my homeland. And I'm like, then become very interested in this to an extent I didn't know I could be because it affected me directly in a way, right? Or indirectly, but it affected me and my heritage. So I was like, let's go explore it, but like no cameras. Like let's just go volunteer. Let's just go volunteer and like see what it's all about. So we did. We volunteered there for 2 weeks. That was awesome. And I don't speak Vietnamese, by the way. Like I thought I could go to Vietnam and shoot a feature documentary. It's a short, but I thought I could shoot a feature documentary in a language that I did not know. As my first film. So that just gives you an idea of the athletic confidence I was like going into film with. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So anyway, we volunteered there for 2 weeks and we kind of got to know the kids. And my friend got his cousin to come in and like translate for me. And like she would translate what the kids were saying. And we got to know these kids. And then we kind of like took a minute and we were like, do we want to focus on this as our doc? And we asked them, would you cool if we film your lives? And they were like, yeah. So we did. Yeah. That's how it started.
That's an incredible story. When you were growing up, did you have any friends, any classmates, or any people at UCLA that had a disability? Had you ever been exposed to or seen it out like in your life?
No, not really. In all honesty, I think probably affected me that much more too, because I was never exposed. No one in my family has a disability or, um, not really. And so I would say with this, it was, and also, it was just, So no, I didn't. And I'm just taking that in being like, I think it probably like impacted me too in a different way. But what I kind of also, because then you have to ask yourself, well, who am I to make this doc? Like, right? Like, who am I I am saying like my biggest problem was being a great athlete and I was too scared to leave. Like, I mean, it's really not a it's like I had taken for granted a lot of things, but we would play soccer every afternoon with these kids. And what I also loved though, and I think where I could really, um, where there was also like no boundary though, I didn't like, oh, look, say, oh, these are kids with disabilities. Like, they didn't think like that because they never acted like that. Like they played, I mean, they would trip me in soccer. There was just no, there was no, uh, like, there was no awareness in that level, or at least there wasn't any like, um, they never used it as something. It was always like, this was the way it was, and that was their world. Um, so it was interesting in that way. And when I look back on it, but I don't know, I felt like very at home and yeah, I kind of digressed, but yeah.
No, no, I think that's a really, really remarkable point because I was going to go in a different direction. It's not like, who are you? I think it's fascinating that you were exposed to this part of the world that I think a lot of people who see that, who see your film, I've read some of the reviews, like, there's a shocking, right? Like if you've never seen somebody with a disability and here they are in this camp, orphaned, and you weren't, I think a lot of people would have said, I don't want to do this. This is too uncomfortable. Instead, you took it and said, we're going to go volunteer. We're going to go get to know these kids. We're going to ask permission. We're going to explore this. So you embraced it and you saw them as people different,
Yeah,
right? And that's incredible. Like, I think that's not a lot of people would have done that.
that's interesting you say that because sometimes with the film, I would get people be like, I can't watch it. It's too much for me. It's like, well, it's life. Like, no one's feeling sorry for themselves. Like, don't pity. That's like the really big, interesting thing. And I think that's like, to me, that's the one thing that would irritate me. Like, I wouldn't care if people gave me a bad review, whatever, but if people are like, I can't watch it, it's like, they're just kids. Like, they're having, they don't know any different. Like, it's not a comparison game. And I think that's leads to a way larger issue that obviously I'm probably not like the person to like be the spokesman on. But I have to say it led me into a world too of whole different type of empathy to the struggles that I've never been aware of. Like basic stuff, like when we would like when we went back and we're filming with Chau, like you realize how many sidewalks don't have ramps. Like it's unreal. And then you start to look at it in America, and you think, oh, it's normal in Vietnam. America's like the worst. Like it's a really maybe not the worst, but you just start to have a whole different reality though when you start to spend an immense amount of time. For someone like me who would take it for granted or something like that, I'm traveling with Chow. It's like you really realize the gaps and things. And so anyway, it gave me a whole different perspective on that. And that was probably for me one of the biggest things to come from it was it opened up a world I had never needed to really know, you know? Um, so anyway, yeah, but the only thing that irritates me, a lot of people close to me are like, "Oh, sorry, I can't watch it." It's like, all right. Like, okay, no worries. One day maybe. But
Yeah, that's an unfortunate thing that we just, I hope that changes one day, but I I would love to talk to those people too and just say, look, life can be awkward and difficult, and it's it's just part of this unbelievably rich experience that we can have, and that just get over that initial awkwardness and learn to see them as human beings. A whole new point of view and perspective is going to open up for you. It's going to be a good thing, right? It just to get over that initial awkwardness of seeing someone who's different than you. That's all.
Yeah, 100%. And the thing is too, I think like that's what's holding progress in some way back. It's like that mentality there is the part of the problem.
Yeah.
And a lot of people be like, well, because it's young kids. And I'm like, but they are okay, you know? So anyway, we don't have to spend too much time on that, but I hear you in the sense of like, that's part of the problem, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And I think the way you captured their humanity and Chow's humanity was remarkable. Like even just for the opening of the movie is like him there, like putting the blanket on,
Yeah,
the kid there, and you can see like he's helpful. He's part of like they just feel it's a family. But one
100%.
one thing that really caught my attention was this dynamic there with the nurses. Like they're they're doing a difficult work in the sense that they're teachers, they're caretakers, they're almost in some ways substituting as parents, but they don't want to. You can see that they don't want to get too emotionally involved, and yet they
Yeah.
do. Like it's not an easy position to be in. Can you like tell us a little bit more of that backstory and what you noticed when you were filming? Like what were they like off camera, and what was the dynamic between them that like with Chow, for example, like they're telling him, we're going to support you if you get educated, right? You should finish high school, don't become an artist. A lot of parents here in the US tell their kids that,
Yeah.
right? So it's like they're taking on that role of parent and trying to do what's best for them and fighting with them in that way, and yet they gave up on him in a sense too.
I think when I was there, I was like 20. I felt differently about it because I felt we were so close with the kids that I would get some of that. I was really close with one of the nurses. I like we cried when I left. Like I was so, and she was like loving but strict too. She's in the film. I'm trying to think of where exactly she is. But anyway, I think here's the thing. One, they're trying to create an image of the place and they have to be careful with like who they let in. To be honest, that we got access like we did is mind blowing in retrospect. They ended up kicking us out. They're like, yeah, you got enough. You need to go. Um, the nurses, though, I think deep down they really care for the kids because I was a nurse there for some time and I was in their shoes and I get it. I also teach uh, filmmaking part time through a wonderful program, but I get it. I get you can't always be the mom. You can't always be this. You can't always have the love. It's just really, it's so stressful. They're understaffed. But imagine you're the nurse and you know, first of all, like Vietnam doesn't, well, at the time where they don't like look at art like we do. They don't have Hollywood. They don't have, like it's a bit different. So imagine you are dealing every day with kids who have a disability. In Chow's case, he lacks muscles in his arms to paint. And this kid is telling you, I'm not going to do all the other stuff. I'm going to be an artist. And they're like, it's hard for an able bodied person to be an artist. And then it's only 1% of those. You're out of your head. I think they're saying it so you're like, we don't want you on the streets. We do not want you on the street. We want you to have a life. They teach them computers. That was like the thing. And that worked out for a lot of the kids. Not a lot, but a few of them. And Chow is just like, no one's going to tell me what I'm doing. So can you imagine how frustrating that is with a 14-year-old, a teenager telling you, you don't know what you're talking about, like screw you. And you're an adult being like, I'm struggling to pay my rent in a job that is very taxing, it's very difficult, and everything's political. And they see the way people come in and look at these kids every day. They're the other. They're not people, right? Like that's the whole thing. So I think I get where the nurses are coming from. And to be honest, I think that their intentions are in the right place? What if they told every kid in there, yeah, you can do whatever you want in any, it doesn't matter where you are, to any kid. Um, it's not always true. And these kids don't have parents, they don't have family. I mean, Chau has parents, but no money. Like it's not like Elon Musk's kid who can probably do whatever he or she wants to. I actually don't even know the gender of their child, but um, it's just different and I get it. But it took me a minute because I was of the mindset like, Chau, you can do whatever you want, man. Like, screw them, you know? No, I'm 35 now and I struggle and I'm like, and Chau is right now living like his best life. And I'm just like, he did it. And I think like for him though, what really was the success, he just never looked at how he was different. He never looked at what he didn't have. He always looked at what he had and it carried him. And he went through his hard times, but and he's close with like one or two of the nurses still. So deep down, they love the kids. But
And it came across that it's a very complex relationship and dynamic that's going on there. Um, why, and thank you, that was a great answer. Why do those tourists come in every day like that? Like, what is that about?
well, there's two different things. We show two different things in the docs. There's two different instances of photographers. So the first one, you straight up donate to this hospital and they like take you down the hallway and show you the rooms. It's like kind of zooey a bit. It's weird. Um, the second one is that they have doctors and students who are like actively coming in, like orthopedic surgeons or students studying to be orthopedic surgeons. There's a photo where they're taking a photo of the kid's hands.
Yeah.
Um, those are doctors. So they are going to go study that and see if there's like, what would be the orthopedic solution here, things like that. So the hard part is, yeah, a lot of foreigners come in, you donate, and you can just like, that was like a moment, right? Like, were you just catching these people like awkwardly taking photos of just like a kid? But I think that that's again a really honest and like that's unfortunately part of humanity too. It's the gawking, it's the other.
Yep. 'Cause
So
they're doing it to raise money, but it's hard because I just, I was born with multiple physical disabilities. I've been in that, other place many times, and it was one thing that really I could relate to that was not, I think most people probably wouldn't, is when Chau and one of his friends were there, and there was a little girl with,
yeah,
and he
well,
was,
yeah,
yeah, and he was scaring her, and he was laughing about it like, haha, she's scared of me, right? Like we used to do that where me and my friends, when there were kids who were being mean or disrespectful, we made up a story that I have one arm, that we were camping and I ate my arm, we were all hungry, and so and cut off my arm, and we ate it,
so
and that,
amazing.
and that we were gonna go and eat their arm too, and we'd chase them away, and they'd run away, mommy, mommy, that kid ate his arm, and we would just be laughing the whole time. So I could relate to that moment. It's probably not the healthiest thing, but it's a moment of empowerment.
I was gonna say, though, it's about taking back power in a way. Obviously, this is an intangible thing, but when someone does that, I think it is a way to like one, like be lighter about it, but also, yeah, take back the power. I mean, that to me has to be my favorite part of the movie. That happened multiple times too. And think about it. As you were saying, it's like people stare. It's weird. Like we took Chau to the MoMA right? The MoMA's in New York. Yeah. Right? Yes. The Museum of Art. And people stare and it's upsetting. I get so mad, like it lights a fire in me. But I think there's two things. One, you really just don't care about it. or two, you use it in some way, and maybe it is healthy. I don't really know. I think that that kid, those kids deserve what they got, you know? I think it's amazing. I would do it. I would be like, I would have done the same thing.
Um, when Chau went home, he had fought with the nurses and he went home to the camp. And you're filming him there alone in the house, nobody there to welcome him. He's basically living a solitary life, like in this home.
Yeah.
That must have been really difficult as a filmmaker to experience that with him.
Yeah, he was kind of on the tail end of a few things, so I wasn't there, honestly, like, through the hardest parts, but I think to be honest, you don't you don't know how it's all gonna end. Is this where it ends? That you're gonna be home alone and sad and, and then you as a documentary, not to make it about me, but it very much becomes about you in the sense of you feel a responsibility for the person. So for me, luckily, I kind of came onto the end of that where I kind of knew there was this way out. So it was easier for him, I think, to like talk about it a bit more, um, and reminisce. Um, so yeah, but we actually skipped because I wasn't there to film it, but right after, there was a part where he actually left his home and went to a Buddhist temple.
Hmm.
And I wasn't there for that. And that was like that was when he like picked up from loneliness and kind of like got deep with himself. And then we got the part after. But it was hard because this was like before smartphones. Like all like we weren't like he never really had a phone. Like we couldn't like communicate. We would lose communication. Like it was just that was the scary part. Like, where is he? Like, what's he doing? Because no one seems to care about him. And meanwhile, I'm going through my 20s, like just emotional roller coaster of identity crisis, which now that I've said that so many times, I feel like that's just my life. But I think, yeah, it was just one thing. I just never felt sorry for Chow. He has this thing, whether that's me or that's him. I always kind of knew he'd be okay, but it was those moments of silence where you're just kind of like, what's happening and how is this story going to end? And so I would say like that. Yeah, there were moments where I was concerned, but deep down, I knew he'd be okay in some way. Um, I learned about that kind of like really more suicidal stuff later down the line because I wasn't there really for that. He kind of talks about that in past tense while I interview him.
That would have been obviously you were already going above and beyond, but that would have been an incredibly interesting part of the film if you had been able to capture him at the Buddhist temple just to see, how did those monks uh react to him, accept him, let him in? What did that look like? And what did that process of building his self-awareness and really going inward, what was that like? But it's a cool part. It's a cool like tidbit that you added, but that would have been really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, in retrospect, there was so much more I wish I would have gotten. I was like working full time and
Yeah.
trying to make other stuff and not knowing, it was all over the place. But from what I understand, when he went there, he had a place to stay, he had food, and he was around people who cared about him, it feels, like a community. And from what I understand, I'm not sure if Chow really ever felt like the other, but I think there he felt it was all normal. Like he felt in a safe place. I think it was more at home in the middle of the country, I mean, you see you can't use a wheelchair.
Yeah.
And you can't go anywhere. You can't drive, like going to his house. We went through such a narrow dirt road with like trees just like hitting the cab. he was so isolated. I think like at least at the temple, there was more communication and more support in some way.
Yep. Community.
Hmm.
I think when he part of the film, I think everybody should watch this movie. I think it was brilliant, but what really the his courage to go out into the city and try to get a job and
Yeah.
not knowing anybody, using public washrooms to clean himself, to
And the one we feature in the movie is a nice one. It's a nice one. Imagine like the stuff I wasn't there for that I've only heard about and like what that is like, you know?
I mean, the courage and the resilience that he showed is remarkable for any human being, period. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know that maybe it's been too long since I've been in my 20s, but I don't think I would have had that kind of courage and resolve to put myself through that much. It's really he's just like a singularly remarkable human being, period.
Yeah.
Um, and you did a great job with what you captured. When there was a shot that was taken when that interior design firm let him in,
Yeah.
where he was finishing a painting, and I think the head of the firm let him live there, let him work,
Yeah. He lived on the couch.
right. You could see that he was taking a picture of him finishing the painting, and it was almost like a proud dad moment, or a proud, like, you saw pride in him that
Yeah.
Chau was doing this. It was a really remarkable shot, probably unintended, but it really captured, I think, an interesting dynamic between them.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was that guy was really wonderful and he let us film in there a lot. But yeah, Chow lived in there, he lived on the couch. He draw like the thing is with Chow too, he he yeah, he's not there's no shame. He just this is what I need to do to get to the next thing and I deserve this and I think that's like what I could even learn from him. But yeah, he made his own luck and he yeah, had that place. It was really well kept. The women would like come and clean it and he was like friends with them and they'd bring him food and he yeah, it was a proud dad moment for sure. It was cool. It was great. And that guy was just doing it actually out of like the goodness. He was like, I'm he's like, I wanna like he's like, I have no reason not to like let him hang here and do his paintings and whatnot. And it ended up being this really wonderful thing to let kind of Cho because we finished the movie while he was there. And then after the nomination, he started selling his paintings because people saw the movie and they're like, well, we'll buy. And they would go for nothing. And now they're like more expensive, obviously, because he can charge that much. But yeah, it's nice how it all timed out.
It did. He became a really good painter. That vocational school was also, there were some great moments in there too,
Yeah.
where like his ability to adapt and to think outside the box within his own constraints is something that we should all be learning from, because he had been drawing with his hands this whole time, and obviously there were some constraints there. When
Yeah.
he went to the vocational school, like, something clicked in his mind where he was like, "You know what?
He got jealous of
He
the girl.
got jealous of the girl and said, I'm gonna be special too."
Yeah. He was mad. He was straight up mad she was getting more attention than him. He was literally like this bitch. which is which is so wonderful though, because I mean, like, who hasn't been like this guy? Like
Yeah.
he was like, watch what I'm gonna do. And whatever, he did it, he made it happen. So yeah, no, he definitely outside of the box for sure.
What I think there's so many different ways to interpret that film. Is there a takeaway that you would like people to have that maybe maybe they're missing when they see it?
I don't know if I've actually ever even been asked that question. I think I think no matter what, I'd hope by the end of the movie you see Chow as just who he is. I think when we were introduced, most people, like myself back in 2006, can be, it's very easy, like we've been talking through this podcast, to do that other thing. Like, I'm different to this person because language, culture, disability, whatever, can be all these things. And I would hope by the end, um, that you see Chau for who he is, his flaws, his personality, like the good and the bad, right? Like, he's jealous, he cheated, like he's a human being. Like, so, because another thing is, I hate sounding cliche in this, but like, equality is extremely important. It's something that a lot of us, I think in our heads we are, but there's so much prejudice in so many aspects of things, myself included, right? But I remember when I went into making this movie, when I would Google search Agent Orange, all the kids in that camp would come up with image search, but they were all shot high angles, very victim. And you would think these kids are in perpetual pain, you know? So for me, it was just such a different experience I had, that I would hope by the end that any of that stuff would be wiped away. That you Because a big thing, for example, is like, it was a big, just to like really, and I hope I'm not being ignorant in any of this, but there was this thing where Chow cheats. People are like, well, you shouldn't put that in because it's not a good thing for like the main character. I'm like, dude, he's human. Like, we can't make this like painting of like, because again, you're putting them on an inhuman pedestal or whatever you want to call it. So for me, it's always been about um the honest humanity of it. And I really hope that if there were prejudice in the beginning, it would kind of wipe away. Um, but to be honest, no, maybe you Google Agent Orange if you don't know about it, or see what you can do to help, or just become slightly more interested. But I think I just really made the movie for Chow, and I just tried to be as honest as I could about it. And then everything that came after was just a dream, because I didn't see that coming. We tried to get people, we submitted to the Oscars. We four-walled it, it's called. We put it in the theaters. We had a distributor at the time who's like, we think this could get nominated. That hadn't even crossed our mind. So we four-walled it. My parents hadn't even seen it. They go see it in this theater. Just all you do is run it in a theater for a weekend and have an ad in the newspaper. So we qualified. We dropped off like 100 DVDs to the Academy. We were trying to get people to like, come on as PR. That's what you do. Because all these other docs you're competing against have won all these awards, major awards, and they got to qualify for free. And no one would accept us. And I was like, well, no one, either it's in a different language or it's this or, whatever. There was always a reason. Then we got shortlisted, and then like everyone wanted to rep us. And so like when you had the PR people telling you no, 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 you're thinking to myself, well, it's not gonna ever work. So it kind of went somewhere we didn't expect. But no, I just think just seeing Chow for who he is, and also understanding like he's not a perfect person, and but what makes him special in his own way is his insane tenacity, and just like, I don't feel bad for myself. And if you do, I'll take advantage of it. Like, a lot of it is he's like, oh, these people are interested that she can paint with her feet. Watch this shit. I'm about to, I admire that. I admire that there's never like, yeah, question, for better or for worse. Like, and Chau knows this. I tell him, he's not the easiest person all the time. Like he'll always find a way. Like if you tell him no, he'll find a way. It's just, who he is. So yeah. So anyway, I think it's just more that it does justice to him, and to answer your question, that if there was prejudice at the top of the film, that it's gone by the end of the film. So yeah.
I think for me, you succeeded. You showed their humanity. That scene of them playing soccer was awesome. I'm so happy you put that in there. Um,
They're good players too. Like I'm in that. Like we would just play all the time, and yeah, and there were fights.
that
They're kids.
showed
They're
that,
children.
yeah, that's exactly what you showed. They're human beings. They're kids, just like everybody else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Did you,
uh,
was that, I know we have to wrap up soon, but
are you good?
what was that like to be nominated for an Oscar in your first film?
Well, it was my first doc. I had done a lot of, so I had done like narrative shorts, and film is not, it is like the festival world is an interesting place. So I had gotten denied from even with Chau, I'd gotten denied from the day I got nominated, I got denied from the festival. So I had done a few films. They had their highs and lows. Then I finished Chau. We got into a few festivals. It's where we found like our distributor, I should say our sales company. And um, when we got nominated, it just felt like finally, like it just felt like the biggest win, because for me, it didn't change anything. I'm still me. It didn't do anything to me, except maybe have a little bit more confidence, or we can go into all that mental stuff, but it just kind of like showed people that my film was important, which was really nice. And that Chau's story was important, and really what it did for him was so awesome. But it was really fun. It was cool. But in Hollywood, the Oscars come around every year. And the way I look at the Oscars is, it was a real cool thing to be nominated. It's very political. The minute we got nominated, it's like, who are you going to shake hands with? What events do you pay to go to? Who are you hiring as your PR? Like, it's like running for president. It's just like and I didn't really want to do that, because imagine like you have like 3 films that have just been perpetually ignored, or you don't get into the festivals you want. Now you're in the Oscars. And my PR person said something to me. She goes, listen, the truth is you're probably not going to win. This film was done by HBO. She's won the Oscar before. This other film is like Olivia Wilde and Steve Tish as the producers or whatever. It's like, we're probably not going to win. And I was like, okay. And she's like, we had this couple, or like this team that we represented, and they kind of knew the same thing, and they just had a good time. And I was like, then we'll just have a good time. So because I was stressing out, you start like getting obsessed with Gold Derby and where the rankings are, and it's just, you lose everything. I just didn't want to like end up at the Oscars being like, I lost, which by the way, you won if you got the nomination. That's never going to go away from your name. I didn't want to like be there and be like, oh, bummer. And like, I'm at the Oscars and I'm hating life. I was like, no, let's go to all the events. We'll talk. We'll be honest. We'll drink. We'll have a great time. And we did that. And it was really fun. And you get to meet some people and buy some people drinks who you never like thought you'd get to meet, or, whatever, not this early at least. And it was a lot of fun. And I got very immersed in the world of people who are fighting for the cleanup of Agent Orange. Definitely like into disability rights and things like that. And so it led into all these things. It made me important for this like moment in time. And I think what we did with that moment in time was good. In the film world though, for the minute you get nominated, they're like, what's next? And if you don't have something that's next, it's trouble. So it's like it was 2 very different experiences. But overall it was, it was crazy,
That's a good, yeah, I imagine that I'm glad that you stayed grounded and then you enjoyed the moment. And and got what you needed to get out of it. Because like you said, like that Oscar nomination is with you forever. It sticks with your name, and it's a good thing to have by your name.
Yeah. So it was a lot of fun, and yeah, it was good. It was great, and it's good for Chow. And I really like, I think did the most for him. He's the one who's really taken advantage of this all, and he lives in the US now, and he's chilling.
I did. So he's in the U.S. now. Interesting.
He's in the US now, and he somehow lives in Texas with friends, and he travels a lot. He got to do a lot. Like he went skiing for the first time, and I mean, there was some really wild stuff he got to do, snorkeling and scuba diving. I mean, the guy's done everything. I think people just saw him and were like, yeah, we want to like host you. And like he just started like going places and meeting people and being really wonderful. And he visited me in LA. So I saw him, and yeah, it's really cool.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Is he speaking English now?
A lot better. I'm the one who needs to be like speaking Vietnamese. I can still just order food, and that's about it. So I could survive. But yeah, he's
So,
doing good.
so how do you think like moving forward with your career as a filmmaker, how do you think the experience of Chow changed you? Like, are you looking, did it help maybe diversify how you think of characters, how you get into different perspectives of different human beings? Like, how has it, or did you kind of put that aside and say, as somebody creating fiction, it didn't have much, like, it didn't have much of an impact. They're two separate things.
I think they're very much similar, but like I just produced a doc that I'm one of the writers on. So it's me and the director like wrote it, because now you know, you craft the story, you're a writer. So that this helped me a lot with that, because this took a lot of, has a similar thing with Chow where the information was backdrop, but the human stories are front and center. And learning how to be honest about characters without infringing on their privacy, and molding a human story that people can relate to on a universal level. So I think that really helps. Um, when it comes to fiction, I think that they probably subconsciously intertwine, but I never think actively. I mean, for me, every movie you make is just you're getting a step closer to becoming a better storyteller. Documentary has different parameters. Um, but I think really too what Chow taught me was just being really honest. Like that, you know, that thing I brought up about like we shouldn't show him cheating. You have to show him cheating. You have like in the doc, they can't just be these perfect people, because that's not how people are. So again, though, it's always tugs at a moral line, because like we just released this doc, we showed it to people, and they're like, "That's a pretty intimate scene. Can we have it removed?" And it's like you have to explain why it's so important that it's in there. Chow was like, "No, that's what happened. Like I was gonna cheat. You know, like he's like, yeah, I didn't like that girl." And that's the difference with him. So for me, I think this just really about how you honor your subjects, but you are able to craft a story and communicate that to your audience.
Good answer. Can you tell us anything about your current projects that you'd like the audience to know?
Yeah, I can say some stuff and other. Well, I'm shopping a series right now. It's fiction. That's through going through the pitching process right now, but I'm really hoping. I mean, it's looking good. But I'm not gonna can't say too much there. And yeah, getting a first narrative feature off the ground. But what I'll focus on is the film we just finished, which is I didn't direct it, but I wrote and produced it. I co-wrote and produced it. And it's a very it's a little, it's not social justice. It's not anything it's a different, because it deals with it's called Bottle Conditioned. It's just making its way into the festival circuit. We literally finished it like 2 weeks ago, a week ago. Just had our first investor screening and stuff like that. Um, but it's essentially about the oldest type of beer in the world is called, or one of the oldest is called lambic. It's a completely naturally fermented, heavy culture in Belgium. It's this very special beer that takes years and years and years to make. It's like an art form. The brewers, not like regular beer where it's in a lab and lab grown yeast and it's in these big tanks. This is like aged in wine barrels and blended, and it's in champagne bottles, and it's very fancy. Um, and we follow, and it almost went into extinction after World War II. Coca-Cola kind of came in and just standardized taste and made everything sweet. And this is not a sweet beer. And we follow three of the producers who survived after World War II. It was almost everyone shut down because their beers right now are the most sought after beers in the world. They have, through the craft beer revolution, have had this like people pilgrimage there. It's like wild. It's insane actually. And if you have they age for years, so you can keep bottles from the 80s like wine. They go for thousands of dollars now. So we follow two families and then one new guy. And the thing is with the families, the dads or the older people have gone through the real hard times. They were there, would ship with no one wanted their beers. They were struggling to survive. And now the younger generation, who are now like in their 30s, 40s, 50s even, they're trying to meet the demand and they want to try new things. But the older guys are like, screw these new, beer guys who want to, no, it's done like this. So it's about the generational shift of like, how do you move something with so much like conviction and so much art and intention, and how do you shift it into the real world without losing tradition, without losing the heart of it, without losing the spirit of this very, very special thing that, went through a lot. And so history and the making of is more of the backdrop. And then we follow, these three producers with three very different stories. But we're very, very proud of it. And I really love it. I think it actually has a lot of Chau vibes in it, in the sense of it's a movie about beer, but by the end, you'll maybe like have that emotional. I'm hoping you have that like teary eyed kind of feel, or like it gets you. Because I think in doc, what really at least intrigues me is personal revelation. To see someone grow, through things like Chau does, like in the end where he makes this like revelation about the number three or his life. It's very similar in this film. Um, and they're just, I'm very excited. So Bottle Conditioned, we'll be announcing like where that's premiering and all that stuff. So that's the one I'll focus on plugging.
Can't wait to see it. It sounds like an amazing story. And it also, it changes the audience, but it changes you too, right? As a writer, as a filmmaker, as a human being, which is, I think I would imagine as a creator, that's part of what keeps you coming back for more as well.
Yeah, it's a very strange addiction. I was just asking my producing partner because this was a really hard one in that, again, we went over to another country, and luckily he speaks French and he understands the language. For one of our producers speaks French, the other's Flemish. And I asked him, was it worth it? Because we went through a lot getting this made. We had investors. It was very different. Chau was made on my own money and some donations and stuff. Because we went through so much, and he's like, yeah, it's like it is worth it. And that's the sad thing. Oftentimes it is, but the pain to get there, like right now, just getting this new movie off the ground, you need X, amount of money to do it. And it's hard to find people who want to get into film sometimes, because, and especially make something with like, at least have the integrity. Because sometimes when you just go to a studio, you become an employee, and, it's important to be able to hold on to your own final cut and things like that. So, it's always hard, but I keep coming back. I think I've always known from like a young age that this was like my purpose. As maybe as silly or arrogant or self-righteous as that sounds. Without it, I feel like I'm empty. It's been a minute since I've directed something and it's really weighing on me. So um, there's nothing else I don't think I could do. So yeah, so I think it's always worth it. It's just a pain in the ass. I wish I wish people are like something about like, oh, filmmaking and money. I'm like, dude, there are easier ways to make money. You don't have to make a film, like whatever. But you got to really love it. Luckily, I do. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. And even when you have all the money and you have I think a lot of people don't realize, like, just sit and look at the credits, on the next blockbuster movie you watch and realize there's hundreds, sometimes thousands of people working in the background to make this 2-hour film happen.
Well, that's what's so unfortunate too right now with the Academy. They're not televising. I mean, they don't even televise the shorts anymore, but they don't televise so many things like we're supposed to be. It's just, let's throw this out there because I am pissed about it. Is like the Academy Awards is supposed to be a time where we celebrate filmmaking, celebrate the art and the craft of it. And you're cutting out those people in the credits. Not, I don't even think we have enough awards for the jobs that are done, but to cut out sound or editing or these things that, I mean, these are the people who it's like their job can be thankless aside from the paycheck sometimes if the paycheck is good and they like make a movie come together. So yeah, exactly. It's like, yeah. Anyway, I won't go off on that rant, but it's unfortunate sometimes. Our industry is going through a reckoning and a kind of a very weird time, and streamers have changed everything, and doc is changing a lot. Doc is changing so much. It's so crazy. Um, so I'm happy that Chau kind of came out when it did. And we'll see how bottle condition goes in this new market because yeah, it's not the Tinder swindler. But no hate on the Tinder swindler. I'm just saying it's the different kind of doc.
Yeah, I did not see the Tinder swindler, nor do I have an interest in it. So
Yeah, I mean, it's a bunch of women who get swindled by this dude, and they have like Netflix is doing this thing right now where it's all these scammer things. So like you have the bad vegan or some crypto thing, and I don't know. It's just interesting. Um, happy stories are happy endings are hard to sell right now. They really are. Like that's a fact. It's like not just my opinion.
interesting. I guess it goes in cycles too, because the 1970s, so many great movies came out in the 70s that did not have happy endings, and that's what people were drawn to at the time. So I get it, but even though the ending for Chow, I guess you could say it was happy, but it wasn't it wasn't typical happy. I wouldn't describe it right. It was hopeful. It was, wow, look at what this amazing person has been through and what it took him to get here. But it wasn't yeah, I wouldn't describe it as a typical happy ending.
And maybe that's not the right word or I guess what I'm trying to say is, it feels right now like docs are kind of being homogenized to a specific like cut, like paint by numbers. And it's kind of, in my opinion, taking away some of the verite stuff that like I love in doc. And also to talk about what you were saying about these movies in the 70s, those were also very artistic, taking a lot of risks and covering things that have been copied a lot now, but also like they were done in such a way with certain artistic creative expression that I think we're not seeing as much anymore. Because the film industry, and I'm not saying it's the bad thing, I'm not like over here hating, but it's such a business now that it's very hard sometimes to find the early like Coppola's coming out, the Scorsese's, even early Spielberg, like all those things. It's very rare, I think, to find like the Jennifer Kents or the Celine Sciammas or the Robert Eggers. It's a smaller world right now in that stuff. So just with doc, I think specifically, it's become a very much more cookie cutter formulaic thing because docs are in right now. Docs are like where it's at.
Right. But
So,
people, it's almost like that reality TV craze has kind of shifted into docs, right?
so that's 100%. That's how I feel when I watch docs. They're not the docs like I've fallen in love with, or like the Grey Gardens or the Maze over, like all these things that set the tone for. That's not the doc I learned in school. And there's no, I believe there is room for every kind of film. Like my favorite thing when I've had a tough day, I will go on and turn on Notting Hill for the 100 millionth time. There's room for everything. Not everything needs to be like, a Von Trier film or a Michael Haneke film or some deep dive into the psyche. Um, but I just see it bending so much in one way. Like it's very hard sometimes to like, I'll scroll through Netflix for like an hour and not find anything I can, I'll just watch Friends again. It's like, I think we're just at that stage, but I think everything does move in cycles. And so I'm very excited to see like where it goes. Cause okay, so we're hitting this like peak now, but maybe it's going to go back to, we'll go through an artistic thing and then that'll become too much and we'll go back, it all goes in its waves. And, you just got to be flexible, right? It's like, what is high commitment, low attachment?
Yep. But it will be interesting to see. And I do hope, um, and there are some people I want to introduce you to, but I do hope that at the very least, Hollywood can take, or the streaming services, whoever they are, can continue to, can try to make more room for some risk taking, some intelligent risk taking,
Yeah.
and we get more diversity of stories, more diversities of characters. I don't have like, when I growing up, I never saw anybody on screen that I can remember that wasn't a villain or somebody we were supposed to feel sorry for who had a disability. That should
Yeah.
change,
Yeah.
right? And there's tons of examples of that. And there's so many interesting stories we can create around that. We just need to, again, get out of that comfort zone, get out of that formula of, I love Marvel movies, but I'm tired of them.
Yeah, they've definitely milked them really a lot.
Yep.
Um,
So I would just like to see more room for more creative expression.
I agree. And I think, like off what you said, like I'm all about like the diversity and different storytelling. Sometimes I want it to have integrity and not just be like slapped on there. Like, let's just throw this person in here because it hits our quota or whatever. That's fine too. But it would be nice to see some like really, I don't know, real stories maybe. And also if you're listening to this, you're like, there's plenty of them out there, whoever's listening, and you can totally feel free to let me know, via any social media platform you find me on, tell me about a movie I should watch, because I also have kind of become like salty and jaded. And I'm just like, I can't anymore even deal with this, whatever. So, man, 35 and I'm already salty. I worked below the line so long in the film industry, like as a camera assistant. I've just been through too much where I'm just like, whatever. I don't want to watch it. But yeah.
But so you're salty because you care and because you want to see something better. It's not
Yes.
because it's not like you're jaded where you're like, I'm done with this. It's over. Like you're salty because you care about it and you want to.
I just could use more movies that I really love, like, or more movies that like I really gravitate to, or movies that are maybe taken a little or done a little bit more seriously than like just trying to please everybody. Like I'm a huge fan of like Jennifer Kent, like or Jonathan Glazer. I'm really excited to see their next movies. They're definitely that they're out there. They just always take like 800 years to make a movie. So, it'd be nice to have a few more of those in the mix so I can like see at least one movie a year I'm totally into. Did you see any movies recently that you really liked, or any of the Oscar movies or anything like that?
Um, I saw a couple of the Oscar movies and I'm just better not to mention them because I wasn't really,
Crazy about them.
yeah, didn't like them. Um, no, the answer is no. So I haven't taken enough time recently. I've just been busy.
You know,
I do have some things like I love the Dune series. I read all the books and
Oh yeah.
yeah, I want to.
Dune is also, I should have mentioned Dune. I mean, Dune is, but I read that late, like way, like in like my late 20s.
Me too. Me too.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I was given to me by a film person who helped me in one of my movies. Like, oh, you got to read Dune. I was like, all right. And yeah, it's unreal.
Yeah. So I'm looking forward to watching that. I've heard good things.
I like Denis Villeneuve, who's the director. I don't know. The scale is amazing. And by the way, have you ever heard of Alejandro Jodorowsky's Dune, the documentary?
I have not.
Okay, so scratch any other. Don't watch Lars von Trier. He can be annoying. Alejandro Jodorowsky did there's a documentary on him. He was supposed to do Dune in the 70s, and it was like Dolly was supposed to be in it. Orson Welles is possibly the best documentary I've ever seen. It's just really good. I just Google Dune, that will come up. But if you're a Dune fan, that's the film. I saw that in the theater. I've watched it like 6 times because
It-
he's also an amazing mind. This guy. Yeah.
Amazing. Okay. I will go check that out. Yeah, no, there's some great series out there. The documentary that I saw a while back that um was Oscar nominated too that I thought was really good was Crip Camp. I enjoyed watching that.
Oh, I haven't seen that yet.
Uh, go check that out and see what
Okay.
it's on
All right.
Netflix.
Cool.
Um, it just opened me up to the disability rights movement in a way that I just didn't know about it. So it was a great learning experience. But what I would suggest as an interesting parallel with Chau is a lot of the people who started the disability rights movement started out at a camp
Hmm.
in New York, like outside of New York City called Camp Jeanette. And formed the camp did some really interesting things and really kind of set them on this path of changing the world where for the first time they didn't feel like the other, they were accepted, they got to talk about their issues, they just got to be human beings, they got to date, they got to experience all these things as teenagers that society wasn't letting them experience. And I don't know if Chau and a lot of those other kids would have had the same self belief, the lack of shame, all of those things that happen if they hadn't been in that camp for a certain part of their life. So watch Crip Camp. I'd love to know what you think
I will.
about it.
Is it feature or is it a short?
It's a feature.
Okay, cool. I'll definitely. I've heard of it. I just didn't watch it yet, so we will definitely watch that because yeah, we watch a lot of doc.
So how can people, last two questions.
Yeah, go for it.
You've been super generous with your time.
Yeah, no worries.
Is there anything that we missed in this interview that you feel is important to talk about, or maybe that we didn't spend enough time on?
I don't think so. I think we covered a lot of interesting points I haven't talked about. So yeah, I think I mean, I feel good.
Awesome. And how can people reach out and connect and
Yeah.
and get to know you?
So, I mean, I'm on Instagram, I'm like at Courtney N Marsh. It's like Courtney Nicole Marsh, but just the N. So Courtney N Marsh. And feel free to message me or whatever. And then if you want to follow, I'll plug it because my partner is like so into it. He is so big on his social media for Bottle Conditioned. So if you want to follow us there, we give all the updates and like where we're going to be in person. There's also clips of the trailer, but it's at Bottle Conditioned Film on social media. I'd say Instagram is my like choice, kind of like that's where I spend my time on versus all the platforms. I'm on Twitter too, but I mean, I just peruse on Twitter. I just look at the carnage on Twitter. I don't really participate. I just like eye troll. I'm just like looking at what the drama is today. Yeah. So
Smart that you don't participate in that.
I'm not ready for it. It's too much. Yeah, it's just not. But social on Instagram, I'm an image person, so it works for me.
Fantastic. Well, thank
Yeah.
you so much. This was
Thank
amazing.
you.
I really enjoyed it. And Thank you. This was like any closing words, last statements.
No, it was really, really wonderful. And yeah, like if you're, I don't know, trying to do film or you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm kind of always like an open book in that way. I really mean that because when I was kind of like coming into the industry, I just, no one helped me. It just felt very hard to like get any insights. I spend time teaching part time because, yeah, it's just nice to like, have that in. So, I'm always like to hear, thoughts or movie recommendations or whatever. But no, thank you for having me so much.
You're very welcome.